Let's see. There she is. Hello, Pamela Ritchie. Thank you for
Hi.
thank you for joining us. So you are, I haven't really done the introduction yet because I got flummoxed, but you are a jewelry artist and my former professor, and I usually admire you. And just to give a brief introduction, Pam is an art jeweler based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. She got her MFA from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, where she later taught, and I studied with her and did a postgraduate research in Norway. And Pam, your work is in many international collections, permanent collections and institutions, and you've won, of course, the Governor General Award, the Sadie Bronfman Award, which is just so amazing and well deserved. So you have many accolades. And today we were going to talk about design training. We don't have time to go through your whole, we might have to do another one where we go through your whole thing. But yeah, today I was thinking of talking about the training that we've received, and wanted to, I think I'm gonna hop right in and talk about the kinds of tools that you would have provided as a teacher, how to teach us more questioning and looking deeper.
That's a really good question, and probably one that takes a teacher a very long time to evolve. Every student is different, so it's hard to always come up with the perfect solution for each student, but you try a variety of different ways and strategies to have the students look at different processes, different process techniques, etc. So until they can find something that is meaningful for them. So, and then once you've tried a number of different solutions or possibilities, you then have to watch the student really carefully, because at some point there might be something really interesting or intriguing or unique that's coming out, and they may not necessarily see it themselves at first, but if you could give them the confidence to proceed with that, then they'll take off with it, and it's just marvelous what they can come up with. Like one particular tool that I might have used would be to work with materials, for instance. So they would select a material that they want to work with and then start asking questions about that material. It could take place in the library where they're doing research on what the material can do. It can take place in the sketchbook where they're starting to sketch ideas. But at some point they have to have an actual encounter with the material. And at that point, they start carving, bending, breaking, sawing, molding, doing everything that they can to explore, what that relationship is that they can have with that material, and what that material wants to be, and what they can say that's unique with that material. So in that way, they can come up with some possible unique outcomes. And if that doesn't work for them, then perhaps they work better, by going through certain artistic topics like illusion, for instance, or working with a subject matter such as the environment, or working with alternative processes. Anyway, we try a variety of different methods and provide a number of different research tools, and then the student can sometimes put those together, mix and match, and come up with a way that works best for them. And hopefully they can do that within the years of their studies.
Yeah, that actually really brings me back to two things. One is that honestly, the 1-footer rings that are so much my design I'm known for actually started as we were doing like brush and ink, I think, to music. And I remembered I had one of those long, the computer paper that used to hold all together.
Oh, yeah.
And I had this like very long thing that I'd just gone like, doing all this thing. And I remember looking at it down the hall of the studio and being like, how can that be expressed in volume? That kind of undulating line.
Right.
Yeah, that's I
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
forgotten about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the exercises that I used to do with my students, which I really enjoyed. And I think they enjoyed, well, most of them enjoyed it too. And that was providing music that probably they'd never heard before, and then asking them just to go with it.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing that just came to mind for me when you were talking about that is that uh, now that explains why I work so much through materials when I design something new. I'm not very good at like drawing something and then just going to make it. I like going directly to the metal or maybe some intermediary material and exactly what you said. And I was dumb enough to not realize that that came from my training, that that's how I work. I always say to people, I can't just draw something.
Well,
Mm,
some people really work best, just working directly with the material, and other people have to plan it out and design it through the process, the age-old process of using formal properties and pen and ink, and
mm.
some people combine it. And I think you combine a lot of that from my memory of the way you worked.
Isn't that amazing? Wow, so long ago.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun, and it's really good to go back. I mean, for me, I don't always have the luxury we had in school, to really go deep
Yeah.
with developing a new design. I did recently have that chance when I did that, participated in that exhibition for automaton, where I could really massage things and do all kinds of playing with different things, and spend, I don't know, 2.5 months or something coming up with something. It's
Yeah.
harder in the day to day.
It is. It is really hard. It's difficult when you're trying to run a business for sure.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, that's great. It's so eye-opening for me. I'm sure that some people will be watching this later, or some students of yours. I know they were kind of excited that you were coming on, and they're probably all going like, "Oh yeah," because it's so important to remember that amazing training we had and how it makes us. If we go back to that, we can really go deeper again. So what another way to think about that is to like think outside the box. And I think one of the things we talked about when we talked about this a few days ago is to ask why, or why not. I think you said
Hmm.
why not. And do you want to talk about that thinking outside the box and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so a lot of people use that term. It's really common, and but a lot of people probably don't think, well, what does that really mean? A lot of people who aren't in the arts maybe asking, what do they mean by that? And I think if you want to try to figure out what that is, first of all, you have to know what's in the box. So you have a good understanding of the history of the art that you're involved in, and a good understanding of what your contemporaries are doing is really valuable for an understanding of that. And then once you have that, then you can start to ask yourself questions like, well, what is needed? Where's the hole that I can plug in, or what already exists, and what do I do that's slightly differently? That's one way, but another way of trying to get to that place outside that box is just to create a visual record of everything that you love, and that could be leaves on the ground when you're walking along that you take a photograph of, the colors. It can be objects that you see in a magazine, and just constantly applying that into a large book, which could be a record book, and then starting to mix and match things that are completely different, that don't normally go together, but you think, oh, this could be really interesting if I
Mm.
place this alongside with that. And then asking yourself why you did that, because it could generate some really interesting ideas. And of course, the other way would be to try to get out of your comfort zone by applying a new technique or a completely new process that you've never tried before, a new way of thinking, and applying it to something that's familiar, or just completely jumping into something different that you haven't tried before, and that it forces you to make mistakes, and um, and then of course you learn a lot from those mistakes. I
Yeah,
think
that's
if that answers your question, is that what you?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it totally does. And I mean, I wish I have these books, these big sketchbooks of just where we would take. I was a big fan of taking magazines and looking at them upside down, and just looking at shapes and textures that spoke to me, and just tearing or cutting those things out and collecting them in a sketchbook, and making sketch like I liked really large sketchbooks, and collecting, making drawings next to it and writing down why that thing worked, and you just keep on. Um, it's like a dough you have to keep massaging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
Oh,
doesn't always come right away. It often is,
no.
very, very methodical or very slow, or sometimes you have to go away from it and come back to it.
Exactly. And oftentimes it's a little bit painful. I mean, it reminds
Yeah.
me a little bit of the birthing process, of like, there's gestation and then there's like labor. And the
Hmm.
labor sometimes with new pieces, it's like, and that's why the teacher is so helpful when you're in school and you've been doing this, going through this process of like really trying to get to something, and you massage it around, you look at it this way and that way, and then you just like overwhelmed, or you can't do it, or you're scared. There's a lot of courage stuff, and that's where you would go, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you
Yeah,
can.
absolutely. Yes, you must.
Yes, you must. And then we used to have these crits of like sitting where everybody puts their project that they've been working on for, I don't know, a month and a half or something on the
Mm.
on the table, and is critiqued in front of everybody else. It's always kind and very honest. And sometimes you have to go back and do it again, or change something about it. And that process. Yeah.
Oh, it's painful. It's painful, and it was hard for me when I first started teaching to do that, because I remembered what it was like when I was a very young student, my first crits, and how timid I was, and it made me feel so much for the students that I think my very first crits were very safe.
Yeah.
Too much patting on the back, because I felt like I didn't want to hurt them. But I mean, as I became more strong as a teacher, I realized that wasn't helping them at all, and that I
Mhm.
had to be honest, I had to be direct, and that's the only way that they're going to gain anything from it. If you just say, "Yeah, that's great," all the time, it's not really going to be helpful.
Yeah, it's like with it's a little bit like that with employees. If you're not giving them the right feedback, then they can't grow in their role. And in this case, the student's role is to grow as an artist in their own right. So yeah, straightforward feedback would be.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we're at 14 minutes, although we took a couple to get in. Do you want to take one more question, or do you?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just okay. Cool. Thanks.
If you're up for
I'm up for it. I could talk to you all day.
it.
So, the the heritage of the teachers at NSCAD in the jewelry design and metalsmithing department, that's something that's really curious to me, because I've often examined where my own language, artistic language, comes from. I have that European upbringing, and I have the Buddhist thing. And then we've had conversations in the past. I remember where you said, "Well, the heritage of the teachers at NSCAD, where I studied, also influences it." So I was curious that you might expound on that.
Do you mean the teachers that I had my
Yeah,
past, and how that influenced me or the way I teach? Is that?
um, I had thought more of the kind of major teachers that had come into the jewelry department to teach there, but also I think your Norwegian um, professor also was at NSCAD for a while. Is that right? Do I have that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think there's a long tradition at NSCAD of conceptualism, first of all. That started in the early 70s when Gary Kennedy took over. And so it set a kind of a pace, or a kind of a manner in which people were teaching. And so conceptualism was really so dominant and important. And a lot of the instructors that were there at the time were working within that mode of working. There was one, this would be in the early 70s, and there was some of the crafts teachers like Walter Ostrom and Orlin Larson. They were also making objects as well as considering what those possibilities of conceptualism could be within their own genre. So that was part of the development of NSCAD, but things change, and universities and colleges grow and move in different directions. And postmodernism came in, and so a lot of instructors endorsed that. The instructor that you mentioned before, Christian Gaudernack, he was predominantly interested in working with formal properties and a more modernist approach than a conceptual approach. So I think one of the things that really works in the long run for the school that way is that it has a foundation from a long time ago of working with a variety of different materials, and in the history of the school. Then it moved into this conceptual period, then the sort of modernist, and then postmodernist period. And every single time, it's like, when you get a vacuum cleaner, you don't throw out the broom, you add it on. So it accumulates, and the knowledge is passed on and shared with the students, and it provides a very rich environment in the long run. And I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it totally does. That's brilliant.
For me, I also had part of my education was at Dalhousie, so I also had the benefit of Dalhousie University. So I also had the benefit of studying with theater design professors. Of someone like Peter Perina, for instance, who taught, had a more European approach to design development. And I worked with him, and there was theater history. And so it was an interesting balance for me as an individual to come from those two different areas.
Yeah, well, that explains why I also, while studying at NSCAD under you, also took classes at Dalhousie. I took anthropology classes because I was so interested in, like jewelry is very much connected with anthropological studies.
Yeah,
See?
it's excellent.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that when I was talking about how, when you want to get out of the box, you try something different, something new. And if you can study something like anthropology or even a language or something that's completely separate, and then try to see how those things influence each other.
Yeah.
How that helps and why.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think I'll close with a thought I had the other day when I heard on BBC radio a story, and I think this has been all over the internet. There is now, there was a piece of art that sold recently, which is entirely digital, and it sold for $94 million.
Yeah.
And so we're again at a time where, the parameters change. I remember distinctly learning from you about very expensive jewelry that's made entirely from rubber balls, rubber bands. And things like that, and how the material, it's not necessarily the gold and the diamonds that's gonna, we're getting into a whole other thing, but determine the value of a piece. There's, art, or there's other ways to look at the value, and I'll be interested to see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting area that's happened, and I think since the 70s and 80s, perhaps, the inclusion of a lot of alternative materials, and how those alternative materials, the value becomes really the design, the idea, the concept. The value is more in the way the materials are used, how the materials are used, and the ultimate result. It's not a value of the same value as gold, where, if someone does something in gold and puts a diamond in it, it can be very simple, but it has a high value. Whereas with something that is a piece of art, it really has a lot. It's a lot more complex.
Yeah, that's true. So along the way, though, I fell in love with gold. I have to say, I love working gold. I just love the material quality of it, and
Hmm.
so that worked out okay for me.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll keep it there. Pam, thank you so much. This is really great. I think we should have these like monthly or something, but we'll see. We'll
And
leave
just
it for now.
for your listeners, very, very little art sells for those high prices.
Yes, that's right. Especially
Yeah.
that kind of art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this notion that it reaches that, but it's extremely rare. It's only a few.
Yes. It did make me think though, and it brought me back to this when we studied this in school, and yeah, value is very interesting. Actually, there's yeah, an amazing book I recently read called Stoned, which is about value throughout history, and how different things were valued at different times, and how that influenced history, and how history influenced it. So yeah, I can really think about those things a lot.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to let people get on with their Sundays. And thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. It
Uh,
was nice talking to you.
yes,
As
always
always.
such a pleasure talking to you as well. And I'll bid you farewell and wish you a wonderful day. And I'll try to figure out how to stop this live.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good day.